everyone. Welcome to the SynBioBeta Kids Town Hall on the novel coronavirus. We have an esteemed panel of experts for you to dial in and ask your questions to. Joining me today is Jake Glanville, who is the CEO of the company Distributed Bio that's making therapies towards the coronavirus. Also joined from Distributed Bio is Sarah Ives, who is a scientist at the company, and also Natalie Kuldell, who is a founder of BioBuilder, an online training course for biotechnology, and Natalie is also at MIT. Welcome to the town hall. Let's join the conversation. Sarah, tell us quickly what the SynDivax project is and what your role is at Distributed Bio.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm a scientist at Distributed Bio, and my title is Director of Contract Research, and I'm leading our universal vaccines program called SynDivax. Right now, we're making a universal influenza vaccine that's currently in development, and we're also beginning to work on a pan-coronavirus vaccine as well.
Excellent. And we'll be talking a little bit more about what vaccines are and how they're important in just a second when we get to the Q&A. And last but not least, I'd like to welcome Natalie Cordell. Natalie is a researcher at MIT, and she's also the founder of a really cool program for learning about biotechnology called BioBuilder. Natalie, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Excellent. So we're going to start with a question that we have here in the room. Actually, my daughter, her name is Jen. Jen, why don't you come over here and you can ask your question. You can ask your question to the panelists live. So Jen is 8 years old, and you can put these on so that you can hear, and you can sit up here with me, and you can look into the camera here, and you can ask your question.
How did the coronavirus start?
That's a great question. So who wants to take that? How did the coronavirus start?
So I guess I'll take that. So we don't know exactly how the coronavirus started, but we suspect that it probably came from other species. So we think that bats often can get infected with many types of coronaviruses. And there's some other animals that can get coronaviruses, like chickens and dogs, and people get certain types of coronaviruses. It's actually a really big family of viruses, and some of them are pretty mild, like there's a certain type of the common cold. And then there's this one, problem cousin, which is this coronavirus. And it started in China. And we think what happened was someone interacted with an animal and then they got sick. And it could have been something simple. It could have been a bat flew in and landed on someone's fruit salad, and they looked away for a second and the bat gave it a little lick and flew out, and that person ate it. And that was enough to cause that transition to take place.
Wonderful. Excellent. And I have a follow-up question, more on a basic level. Sarah, perhaps you want to take this question. What is a virus?
So a virus is a living thing that has genetic material that can replicate. However, it's unlike other living things in that it needs a host in order to survive. So unlike bacteria or plants or animals or people, viruses need to infect other cells in order to not only replicate, but also survive and make more of themselves so they can infect other things. So in this case with coronavirus, it's a specific type of virus that requires humans and human lung tissue specifically in order to replicate and survive.
Great, excellent. Jen, do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. Well, we have a second person in the studio today. This is my son Kai, and Kai is 5 years old, and Kai has a.
I'm 6 years old.
Oh my goodness! How could I forget that? Kai is 6 years old, and Kai was 6 just on March the 1st. And so Kai, you can ask your question to our expert panelists.
Who first think of the name coronavirus?
Now that's a really good question. Have we stumped our panelists with who first thought of the name of the coronavirus? And I guess, why is it called the coronavirus? Natalie, am I putting you on the spot by asking you this one?
No, I mean, the virus has gone by a couple of names. I think we've settled on the COVID-19 as a name for the illness that's caused by this novel coronavirus. So I think the name coronavirus is a family of viruses because of the shape of the virus. When you see it under a microscope, it looks like a crown. So that is where the name corona comes from.
Great. And corona meaning crown in Spanish, I believe. Excellent. Any follow-up question? No? Okay, great. So we'll be able to move on to some questions from the audience. Let me see what questions. I see that we have a number of questions that are coming from the audience. From Kelly Peruschuk, can someone get the coronavirus from more than once? Can they be reinfected with coronavirus? Jake, can you take that one?
Sure. So kids, I know the coronavirus can be a little confusing and scary, but don't worry, you can be prepared. For instance, I have prepared with a boomerang, a slingshot, and a machete. So basically I'm set. But the truth is you should not need to be that worried about the coronavirus. I'm going to tell you a couple things to make you worry less. The coronavirus is pretty mild if you're a kid. So you're going to get this. It might feel like a cold, or you may not even know you get it. And you should be protected afterwards. So it's like chickenpox. When you get it, you shouldn't get it again. There are some people that we've noticed it maybe takes them a long time to recover, or maybe they're getting it again afterwards. And we can't really tell the difference. And these are older people. And so they may be just, their immune systems aren't as tough as yours. And so at this point, we don't know whether they kind of seem like they got better, but the coronavirus was still hiding in there and it popped back up, or whether it really was the case that they had an old and not very good immune system anymore, a little delicate, and then they got infected a second time. And scientists around the world are looking at that very carefully so that we understand that. But for all of you, and even for your parents, folks that have good, strong immune systems, you should be able to get this and recover, and you should have protection afterwards.
Great. Thank you, Jake, for that answer. Crystal Desmarais, I'm going to ask you to ask a question live. So you should be able to ask your question live, Crystal. Oh, it just says that you're muted. Let me unmute you. I think you're muted on your end. There we go. Crystal, can you hear us? And we have another question from Godzilla. Godzilla, do you want to ask your question? So we'll come back to those live questions shortly. We have a question from Lanto Harivoliana. What are the precautions to be taken at this time when going to the laundromat? And I'm going to give all three questions. My son gets bored staying at home and he decided to go out to play soccer outside. Is that safe? And the third one, is there any food recommended to strengthen our immune system? So Sarah, why don't you take the precautions of going to the laundromat? And Natalie, you could take the, is it safe to go out and play soccer? And Jake, you could take the food for strengthening your immune system. So Sarah, what precautions should somebody take when going to the laundromat?
Sure. So the most important thing when going to the laundromat is just to assume that surfaces are infected. So don't touch your face, don't put your hands in your mouth, and wash your hands immediately when you leave. If you just assume that whatever you're touching isn't clean, then operating under those assumptions should keep you safe.
Great, excellent advice. Natalie?
Yeah, so soccer is a great game to play outside. I think getting outside is really important. And so I think it's not only a safe thing to do to go outside to play some soccer, but it's probably a really smart thing to do. Soccer, especially if you are able to maintain a distance from other people you might be playing with. The virus can travel on droplets from a sneeze or a cough. And so the recommendation is to stay 3 or 6 feet away from others. But if you are kicking a ball across the yard and getting some good sunshine outside and some fresh air, I think that's probably a great way to spend your time.
Cool. Now with respect to food, yeah, so it's all the food your folks are telling you is healthy. Keep eating the healthy food. So fresh vegetables, home-cooked food. If your parents are telling you it's good for you, it's good for you. So go ahead and keep eating that. You have a nice, healthy immune system. You're going to do great. Now, for instance, I like to have a mug. I find that drinking out of this really helps boost my immune system. That's optional, but recommended.
So Jake, there's a lot of marketing stuff you might see on TV or in magazines talking about superfoods that boost the immune system. Now you have a PhD in immunology. Is that all a bunch of phooey? Is there how would you even measure whether something really boosts your immune system?
Well, there are ways to measure whether your immune system works well. The best way is how healthy you feel and how often you get sick. So the more we look at this and the more advanced and powerful tools we have to look at the immune system, the more we realize that what your grandma and your grandpa told you is correct, that it's good sleep, exercise, relaxation, good food, and happiness. These things all contribute to a good immune response. So things that don't really help your immune response is a lot of sugar that is associated with putting on extra weight. And it does some weird things to your immune system cells get a little fritzy. So that would be one thing that's probably not that good for you. And then other than that, it's at your age, it's mostly just about following a healthy, balanced diet.
Great. Excellent. Well, I am actually getting a little bit overwhelmed right now. Not my immune system, but I'm being overwhelmed by the outpouring of questions that we have. We have 22 questions in the Q&A box. So I need your help at home, kids. I need you to click on the ones that you like, and that will filter to the top the ones that have the most votes. And those are the questions that I'm going to ask our expert panelists. So let me dive in there. Are there other sicknesses that will strengthen your immune system against COVID-19? Sarah, what do you think?
So unfortunately, the answer to this is likely no. This is a novel coronavirus. If you have probably heard that term but not know what it means, novel means new. That means that the human population has never been exposed to this before, so we have no built-up immunity that we would have for other diseases like the common cold sometimes, or influenza, or chicken pox. So it's unlikely that having already been infected and healed from another virus would protect you against this coronavirus. So the best thing you can do is, wash your hands, stay away from sick people, and also just do things that are supporting your immune system. Like Jake said, get good sleep, eat healthy food, stay relaxed, things like that.
And the boomerang and the chalice as well?
Of course.
Great, excellent. Next question. This is Christine Gould, and it sounds like this is Oscar asking the question. And you guys are in Switzerland, and Oscar's 6. And Oscar wants to know a very practical question. How bad is it? Like, if 100% is really bad, what percent is it? Natalie?
I'm not sure if the question is asking how sick do people get when they get sick with coronavirus, but if that is the question, I'll say that it varies a lot. There are some people who are infected with the coronavirus who may not know that they are infected, and then there are people for whom they start to feel kind of sick, and it feels like the flu, and then in fact it turns out to be the coronavirus and they get quite sick, and some people end up, especially older people, may end up in the hospital.
And we'll talk about ways to flatten the curve. Maybe that's actually a good point to bring up, flattening the curve. Jake, why is it that many people around the world are battening down the hatches and they're staying inside, they're not going to school? Well, what benefit is that?
So most of you have probably noticed that in many parts of the world, many of you have been sent home from school, and it's probably pretty boring. You're hanging out. You wish you could see your friends, and you even miss school. Maybe you didn't think you were going to miss school, and you do. And so the question is, why did we do that? So the reason that everyone decided to do that is that this coronavirus is pretty infectious. So when one kid comes in sick, they could get a bunch of other people sick. And even if the kids don't get that sick, then the parents would get sick, and then the parents are getting sick, the grandparents are getting sick. And so it could spread really fast. And the worry was that if it spread too fast, even if most people have a mild disease, there's going to be a lot of people that need to go to the hospital all at once. And, our hospitals are really good, but they're not set up to handle everybody needing to go to the hospital all at once. It would create like a really long line. And I don't know about you, but I hate lines. And the people at the hospital, they also hate lines. So they were like, you know what? I've got an idea. Why don't we send everybody home, and then it won't spread so fast? And then at that point, there will be less people getting sick, and there'll be less people, and there'll be no lines at the hospital. And that's what we're looking for here, is just more time so people can come in, they can get in, get treated, recover, and go out without there being a huge line at the hospital. And we think that really will help make sure everybody gets the best care if they need it, and will slow this process down.
Great, thank you, Jake. We have some amazing questions coming in, and shortly, if the audio is working, I'm going to call on Crystal and Andrew to ask their questions. So get ready. But the next couple of questions we have from Nikki Ramis: can weather stop the coronavirus from spreading? Sarah, do you want to take that one?
Sure. At this point, I don't think we know enough about how this coronavirus spreads to determine if cold or warm weather will stop it from spreading or help it spread more. We do know that with other viruses like influenza, they do spread easier in cold weather. However, with this one, I think it's yet to be determined. We'll probably have a better idea in about a year from now.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Anna would like to know, can you get the virus from a swimming pool? Natalie?
Well, in a swimming pool, there are surfaces next to the swimming pool that the virus could land on for sure, just like we were talking about at the laundromat, and you can assume that there are surfaces that may have the virus on it. But the pool water itself has a lot of chlorine and things that will decontaminate it from a lot of viruses. That's why swimming pools sort of smell the way they do, and we don't get sick with other viruses when we necessarily go into the swimming pool. So I think it's probably a good idea to think that there is virus on the surfaces at swimming pools, and you should, after you get out, wash your hands with soap and not touch your face until you have. But the pool water itself, I think, has decontaminants in it that kill most viruses.
Great, excellent. Jen, if you want to come over here, you can ask another question. Kelly Pereschuk: can I make my dog sick, or my dog make me sick? Jake, that's a good question for you, because I think your company uses things like pigs to understand viruses and how they can be an analog for humans. Is that right?
Well, since Sarah is the project lead on the universal vaccine technology, and she runs the laboratories in Guatemala that had the pigs and the laboratory experts in the United States, I'm going to pass that question off to Sarah.
Okay, over to you, Sarah. Can my dog make me sick, or can I make my dog sick?
Okay, so it is true that viruses can spread between humans and animals, and the way that they spread is different depending on the virus. For this coronavirus and the COVID-19 disease, it appears that dogs don't become infected, but I think the research is still very early on, and just to err on the side of safety, it's probably better not to let other people touch your dog and not to pet other people's dogs during this time. However, it's likely that your dog can't get sick.
Great, excellent. Yes, Jen, what's your question?
If someone gets the coronavirus and then they spread it to someone else, does that mean the person that spreaded that, does that mean that they won't get sick anymore?
Oh, no. So unfortunately, coughing on other people doesn't make you get better faster. People have tried this for years. It never works. So every time I get the flu, I certainly go over and cough on other people, and I hope I get better way faster. But no, what happens is when you get sick, it's going to take about the same amount of time to get better. The things that can help you get better a little faster, one is rest. Two, chicken soup or vegetable soup, some tea, lots of liquids. And just relax. The other thing you can do to help people is don't cough on them. So stay home, stay in your room, and then just, let your parents take care of you, and you'll get better pretty fast. And that's really the best way to get better. Yeah, but I think what you're asking is an interesting question, is can you cough out enough virus that there's less in you? And no, almost all the virus stays in you. Just a little bit goes to the next person. So it doesn't really help you.
Great. Thank you, Jake. So we're going to go to a couple of live questions. And then I also want to loop in shortly my colleague, Kevin Costa, who's the producer of the show, because we have over 100 people on this town hall. We have over 70 people who've told us where they're from, and we have over 43 questions. So I need Kevin to read through some of the notes and tell me where we've got people dialing in from in just a second, because I don't have, I'm not going to be able to go through all those notes, but I'm really curious as to where everybody's coming in from. Also, if you've just joined us and you want your question asked, you can type it in the box. You can also raise your hand and we'll call on you and ask you to say your question live to the panelists. And you can also click like on other people's questions. And the ones that go to the top are the ones that I'm going to ask first. So that's how the game we will play. So over to Andrew and Andrew Turner, if you'd like to ask your question.
What is the youngest death, Dr. Jake Glanville, of the coronavirus?
Ooh, a very morbid question that we don't want to get people worried about. But Jake, what's the?
Sure. So here's the good news. The coronavirus is a little bit unusual in that children and people under the age of 20 are very protected. So this is a dangerous disease for older people, like your grandparents and great-grandparents, and we want to protect them from getting it because most of them are still going to be okay, but it can be real dangerous for some folks. To my knowledge, everybody under the age of 10 who's gotten this has had either no symptoms or a mild, kind of like a cold. You know, you'll be a little miserable, but you'll be okay. It's never done anything more than that. I think there have been a couple people who are teenagers who ended up passing away, but this is not very dangerous for children. Our real concern is that you guys don't get that sick. Boys and girls don't get that sick, so you get it, you don't even know, so you're just running around and going over and hanging out with your mom and your grandma, and then they could get more sick. So just keep that in mind. That's why they send you home, is that you show up at class and you're all like jumping all over each other, and then you be okay, but you could end up transmitting that to other people, and that's what we're a little bit concerned about. But for your own safety, it's one of the good news about the coronavirus is that we're protecting you from bouncing it around, but we're not protecting you because we're worried about your own health. You're going to be safe. You're going to be fine.
Great, thank you. And so if you are listening and you have a question, this is the Kids Town Hall and we'll dial people in live. Christian, what's your question?
My question is for Dr. Jake. Will this virus help us understand further other viruses in the future?
Thank you. I'm going to pass that question to our expert and project lead for the universal vaccine technology, Sarah Ives.
All right, thanks, Jake. Yes, if we can study and understand this virus better, it will absolutely help us understand more viruses in the future, such as other coronaviruses that might come into our population, as well as other viruses in general. Because when we learn more about how this virus spreads and how it infects, it will only help us create better vaccines in the future for other viruses too. Basically, every little bit of scientific knowledge that we can gain is like a building block that helps us build new medicines for other viruses, because we can always draw upon that knowledge base to think of things like, well, this worked before, now we only need to modify it a tiny bit to make it work for this new thing. That's kind of how scientific engineering works. You take what you already know, you modify it. If that doesn't work, you try a different modification, and then you never have to reinvent the entire process. We can just keep building upon what we've learned already from this virus.
And
Excellent.
Sarah, can I add to that just for a second to say that the diagnostic that has come out really fast because of exactly what Sarah just mentioned. You know, we really have done a lot in a very short amount of time with the approach that we've taken to this coronavirus. And it's because we've learned so much from other corona outbreaks that were reasonably recent, and we have techniques in science and engineering to make good use of that information.
And
excellent.
And one thing I'd add to that as well is biotechnology has never been more awesome than it is today. We were faster at fixing and working on Ebola than we were with HIV. We were faster with HIV than we were with measles, and we're faster now. And that's one of the coolest things about the biotechnology field, and one of the reasons I love the work that I do, is that we are in this golden age of these awesome high throughput genomic sequencers that can sequence your whole genome in days. these technologies that use lasers to sort through millions of immune cells and characterize them really well. And the whole world is working together on this coronavirus to share DNA sequences and how to analyze the cells and how to come up with vaccines and pills and antibodies. And it's really a testament to this kind of magical era that we live in, where we have the internet with all this data sharing, and we have all these awesome technologies that we can use to work together to solve these problems faster than ever before.
Great. We have a live question from Vinay. Vinay, do you want to ask your question to our expert panelist? To our expert
Hi,
panelist?
John. Hi, John.
Hi.
Yeah, this is. Sir, I want to know about the life cycle of this virus. How many stages, and then if someone is kind of affected with this virus, he or she would become immune for this virus in future?
Great question. Who wants to take that one?
I can say that, if you have raised antibodies against this virus, the belief is that you will be immune from future infection. The virus is an RNA virus, and those do seem to mutate more quickly. So it is not impossible that a person may have a reinfection from a mutated version of this. But when our body learns to fight off this virus, it has learned it in a way that it remembers. And so the hope would be that you will not get reinfected.
Great, excellent. And Vinay, you had another question. What's expected timeline when COVID-19 will go away from most parts of the world? Jake, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I'll take this one. And the answer is it's complicated and that we're not sure. So trying to figure out when this will go away is a little bit about like trying to predict the weather. So this is a big hurricane and it's coming our way, and we're trying to guess when the hurricane is going to pass, and we're not really sure yet. So what we do know is that we think the school being paused, that's going to last at least a couple months. We're going to reevaluate a month from now, but most of our guesses, so we call it modeling, but it's basically us taking out Excel sheets and calculating and trying to predict when things are going to pass. I think at least over the next couple months, we're going to all have to hunker down and wait. The problem is that the coronavirus is pretty infectious. And so we think that it might be able to get pushed down and go away, or it might continue till the end of the year, and it may even continue until the next year and be something that we just have kind of like the flu every year. So that's one of the reasons why we have everybody at home, and it's also one of the reasons why we're working on lots of new medicines, because as soon as we have a good medicine to treat this, that'll help push it down and make it so we don't have to worry about it as much anymore.
Excellent. Thank you, Jake. So I want to call on our producer, Kevin Costa. Kevin, can you give us a summary of where people are dialing in from today?
Yeah, you bet. I'll sure try. It's a little tricky just because there are so many people from so many different places all over the world. Some folks from Ontario, Canada. Jordan is here from California. Nathaniel and Zachary, they're 9 and 7. They're joining us from London. Some folks from Truckee. Shanice is joining us. She's 9. We have Luann, who's joining us from Wenatchee, Washington. She's a grandma, age 65. Also, Kathy from Juneau, Alaska. She's a child at heart. She's 68 years old. We have folks from Manchester, the Bay Area, Nebraska, West Virginia, Sunnyvale, India. Looks like we have some folks from Scandinavia. Just based on the names, maybe South Bend, Oregon, Ithaca. Oscar joined us from Switzerland, and some folks from Central America, Guatemala, and just a bunch of other folks who are all coming in from all parts of the world.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kevin. And we want to know where you're dialing in from, so you can type that into the chat. And if you have a question for our panelists, then you can type that into the Q&A box. And you can also see everybody else's questions, and the cream rises to the top. And Amanda Flyer, you have risen to the top. Do you want to ask our panelists your question? You just want to unmute yourself. You'll be able to ask. Yeah, go ahead, Amanda.
How long can a virus stay on a surface?
Excellent question. Natalie, do you know the answer to this one?
It depends a little bit on the surface, and it depends a little bit on what is going on around the surface. So surfaces that it might last a little longer on are things like hard plastics, and things that might keep it on that surface for longer are things like temperature or it being in the dark, or if it's moist, things that might impact how much of the virus stays there. The good news is that those hard surfaces you can clean, and so that is why you might be seeing a lot of people wiping down surfaces around them. The amount of time that has been reported in the news is under sort of ideal situations where the virus can live for a long, long time. So they're trying to give estimates for the longest time that they've seen it live on surfaces.
Great, excellent. Thank you. Great question. Laurie Giver has a couple of questions. Does hand sanitizer affect COVID-19 because hand sanitizer is for germs? And also, how many coronaviruses are there in the coronavirus family? So maybe we'll stick with the hand sanitizers for now. And I actually have a follow-up question on the hand sanitizers, which is, if I wash my hands frequently, if I then go to bed and I wake up in the morning, is it even more important to wash my hands because the bacteria and the viruses have had a whole 8 hours to grow? And then also, how important is it to get under my fingernails when I'm washing my hands? There's all sorts of disgusting stuff that I see under my fingernails, and maybe we can help with some hand washing advice. Anybody want to take that on?
So I can talk a little bit about the hardest question in there was how many coronavirus family members there are. So viruses make copies of themselves really fast. Like within an hour, they've made multiple copies, or at least one round of copies. And they mutate when they do that. So there's kind of an infinite number of coronaviruses that are changing and constantly changing and changing and changing. And all viruses have this property. The current strain hasn't changed that much, so that what we call the COVID-19 coronavirus, so that we already are seeing mutations occur, and over the course of the year, we'll have more of them accumulate. But since viruses have been around a really long time, because bats have been around a really long time, they've had lots of time to create lots of cousins and cousins of cousins and cousins of cousins. So they're sort of a huge family tree. And there may not be no such thing as a single answer because the new mutations make new viruses every time. That's a cool and weird thing to think about viruses compared to animals where you're like, okay, that's a sheep and that's a cow and that's a donkey, compared to viruses where it's just like an infinite smear of different versions of the life.
Great, thank you, Jake. And any thoughts on the hand washing on the when you sleep and wake up and getting
wash those hands. Just wash them. I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I maybe ask the other panelists. The point about the fingernails is a good question. I guess I don't think about that enough. I just kind of cut my fingernails relatively short.
Yeah, I think so. As a female, I tend to have longer fingernails than some of my male friends, although that's not always the case. Anyone can grow out their nails if they wish, but I tend to have really long nails, and I'm actually keeping them cut really short right now because I don't want to risk having extra viruses or any type of germs under my fingernails. So I'm cutting them at least once a week. And when I wash my hands, first of all, I try to either count to 20 or sing a song that's long enough for 20 seconds. Like you can sing Happy Birthday twice in a row, but there's lots of other songs you can sing in your head or out loud. And I wash my hands, and during that process, I scrape my tips of my fingers like this on my palm for a while I'm washing my hands. And that will help spread the soap under my fingernails like this. And I get like in between my fingers and just make sure that every crevice of my hand is being fully washed with soap for a long enough time to kill all the germs. And hand washing for at least 20 seconds should get rid of most of the germs on your hands. So we know that works. And as far as the hand sanitizer question, hand sanitizer should work at killing the virus if it's on your hands. The hand sanitizer needs to have like a big enough dollop to spread all over your hands and then let it air dry. And make sure that on the back it says that it's at least 60% ethanol. And then that should work.
Excellent. Anything to add, Natalie?
No, I think that's great. There are some wonderful YouTube videos that are helping people learn how to wash their hands and sing a lot of songs too.
Natalie, what's your favorite song for washing your hands?
Ah. Happy
So
birthday is a good one. Happy birthday works. I can remember it all the time.
I want to ask everybody who's dialed in, what's your favorite song for washing your hands? Why don't you type it in the into the chat box, and we can see if we've got any originals. Next, Chris Berry has a question. What are the tests you can get from a doctor to see if you have coronavirus? And this is actually from Lucy, who's age 12, and Grace, who's age 8. Who's been covering the diagnostics and testing?
I can address that. So there's two basic standard tests that we use to check whether someone has been exposed to a virus. And one is called an RNA or a DNA test, and then the other one is an antibody or protein test. And they test for slightly different things. The one that is being used around the world the most is it's testing for the genetic information of the virus. So it's an RNA test, and the technical term is this is an RT-PCR, a qPCR test. And so what you do is you get a little nose swab or a mouth swab, and if you have any virus in there, they take it and they put it in some liquid that removes the RNA or the genetic information from the virus, and they put it in a machine that quickly checks by making lots of copies of that material if it's present. It's called polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, and it checks to see whether that virus material is there. So if the virus is in there, it'll make a bunch of copies and we can check for that DNA. If it's not there, it won't do it. So that's the first test. And that's a really nice one because it is exactly checking for like the genome of the virus. But it takes more time and more complicated equipment. There's another simpler style assay that can be run, which is called a lateral flow test. So it's just a little piece of plastic with a piece of wafer of fibrous paper in it. And have you ever seen like a drop of water fall on like a napkin? You see it spreads out quickly. So it uses that same principle where you put like a little bit of some saliva or something, you drip it in, and it'll slide sideways on the fiber. And if when the liquid's sliding past on the fiber, if the liquid contains the virus, it'll get caught, and what'll happen is two antibodies will grab it on both sides, the virus, and then it'll all get caught in one spot, and it'll create a little blue line. So those tests mean that you need to have antibodies that bind on two different parts of the virus in order for that test to work. And so those tests usually take a little longer to set up, whereas the other test, as soon as we have genetic information about the virus, then we can immediately set those tests up. The main test that you're going to experience mostly all over the world is going to be the RNA test. They're going to take a swab, they'll send it in, and you have to wait a little bit to get the answer. We have lots of those tests, but we don't really have enough to test everybody all the time. So depending on where you are, you may hear them say, you know what, we're going to test people that are sick right now. If you just like, I'm just kind of curious, they might be like, I'm sorry, but we need to save those for people that are sick. So you may not be able to get tested even though you want to.
Great. Thank you, Jake. And we have over 78 questions that we haven't got to yet. So you need to help me out, and you need to read the questions, and you need to click like on the questions that you want me to ask the panelists, and I'll ask as many as I can. But I did want to thank you all for telling us which songs you like to sing when you wash your hands. Baby Shark is Sarah Evanega. Pirates of the Caribbean, Laurie Giver. Someone likes to sing Hamilton. Gloria Gaynor, Kelly Pereschuk, I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. I think that's a very appropriate song. And Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. So some really good Corona-themed hand-washing songs there. The Alphabet, ABC, Sandman by Metallica. The Greatest Showman, Kristen Sorrentino loves to sing The Greatest Showman when she washes her hands. And Kimberly Suda Blake, Vamos a la Playa, and Dance Monkeys. So some really good hand-washing songs. So next I want to see if Carlos Peralta would like to ask your question live. Carlos, over to you. If you just want to unmute yourself. And then Cristo Desmarais, if you want to try again asking your question, you can go ahead and speak. Yeah, Crystal, over to you first.
Hello, my daughter is 7. She wants to know if you can get an upset stomach with this virus.
Good question. Sarah, can you get an upset stomach with the coronavirus?
It's a
Luckily, it looks like you won't get an upset stomach. The main things that you might feel are a fever, which you can test with a thermometer, and then coughing and body aches. It's unlikely that you'll feel like your stomach hurts or that you will throw up. It's not impossible, but that probably won't happen.
Excellent. Thank you. Carlos, do you want to ask your question? And then Anne Maria Coe and Laurie Giver will come to you next. Carlos. Anne, are you there? You can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question. And Laurie, you can do the same. Great. Go ahead, Carlos.
The COVID-19 or coronavirus can mutate and survive in the environment or the air?
Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
How long does it stay in the environment or the air? Was that the question? Yeah.
Yeah.
Natalie, you want to take this one, or?
Well, I mean, I think we're still figuring some of that out, and some of it will only be known after a little while. I mean, the good news, I think, is that after the shutdown in Wuhan, there have been far fewer cases recently. In fact, I think there were no new cases that were identified today. So I think that we can be hopeful that it will be manageable. But, you know, the truth is that if it's in the air and we're not getting sick from it, then we don't know. So, you know, I think our goal should be, how do we get back to living a regular life that we're more accustomed to, that we can treat this if we get it, and that it is manageable, right?
Great. Thank you, Natalie. Laurie, I presume it is Laurie and your kids who are asking the question, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's my kids.
Hi, Laurie. How are you? Welcome. Thank you for joining.
Could coronavirus mutate and become more lethal to children?
Oh, that's a good question. Could the virus mutate and become problematic for children?
Here, I'll take this one. So right now, we've been looking pretty carefully at how much the virus mutates. My company works on making a cure. So we're working on making an antibody that binds to the virus, so you can give that to patients and then it treats them right away. And so we're really interested in knowing how much mutation is happening to make sure that our antibody will recognize a part of the virus that doesn't mutate much. So because we want it to work for everybody. And we're specialists at doing this. So Sarah Ives, one of her, her projects is she looks at large populations of mutating influenza. And the good news here in this spread is that this virus doesn't look like it mutates very much. So there's some mutations taking place. For our purpose, for our antibody, it means it's going to work on all the versions that we see so far, probably. And in terms of it mutating to becoming more dangerous, that's something that we will always keep an eye on, and we'll check on. But so far, we don't see any evidence of that. And because it doesn't look like it's mutating that fast, we're pretty confident that we're going to find medicines for this and then crunch it down. But people are keeping an eye on that. And if anything changes, we'll make sure everybody knows.
Great. Thank you, Jake. Anne, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
How long can the coronavirus stay without a host?
That's a good question. So here's how it normally, there's these ranges. You might have heard about 14-day quarantine. I'm going to tell you what it's normally like for most people, and then I'm going to tell you about the long end for people that might have a longer experience. So I have a friend that I went to college with, and she went to a dinner party up in Seattle. And she showed up, there were 10 people, 15 people there, and everybody was healthy. And then 3 days later, half the people at the dinner party got sick, and it was coronavirus. And what they all experienced, these were adults, they all experienced a high fever, so 103 Fahrenheit. That's like, you don't feel good, you feel kind of sweaty. Some of them had a cough, some of them had, achy bones, and they felt tired. And they were sick, they felt miserable. For the first 6 days were pretty bad, and then there's another 10 days or so where they were still recovering. And then after that, some of them still had a fever. For most individuals, they get sick within 3 days, although some people, it takes them 14 days before they start getting sick. And then there's a bunch of people that actually never feel sick even though sometimes you don't even know you have coronavirus, but you could pass it on to other people. And so that's kind of one of the weird things about coronavirus, is that it seems like some people have this very different range, and children in particular might have coronavirus and not even know it. It should be the case that most people, and most viruses we work with, they tend to clear them out after like 7 or 10 days. And that's when the immune system is coming in there and it's chopping up the virus and it's getting rid of the cells that are infected. This one, it seems like it takes longer, and we're not really sure for all people how long that takes. There's some people where they had it 30 days after, where they still had some virus in them. But those people tend to be older, and their immune systems get a little bit weaker as they get older. Just how like they're tired with a walker, their immune system's like that too. So it can depend, but for you, we'd expect that after 10 days or so, it would probably be reduced. Although we'll say that this is a new virus, so we are still having scientists around the world learning more about it and studying that.
Great. Thank you, Jake. Renee Lam, do you want to ask your question?
So, yeah, my name is Stella, and I'm from Bethesda. My question is, why weren't we more prepared for the coronavirus?
Great question. Who feels like taking that answer?
You want me to do it? Okay. So, the answer comes in a couple parts, and it's about the human story around the world. So, coronavirus started breaking out in an area in Wuhan, in Asia, and we weren't prepared there because no one had ever seen it before. In fact, when this started spreading, because some people don't even get sick, or they doesn't seem that sick, and it's new, everyone assumed, if I got that, what would you think? You'd think, oh, I've got the cold, or I've got the flu. And so they wouldn't think about it much. And it actually wasn't until there was this fish market where a bunch of people were going in to buy fish, and there's a bunch of wet fish on ice, and it's inside, and someone probably went through there and coughed a lot all over the fish, and there's virus all over the fish, and then people were picking it up and sniffing it. And so what happened was over 40 people all got sick at the same time, and probably more. Those are the ones who got sick and went to a hospital. And so that's when really the Chinese authorities were like, oh no, there's something going on. We suddenly had a bunch of people that all show up at the hospital at once. And so then they started working on it, but they didn't know what they were dealing with. So it's difficult to be prepared. And then the rest of the world took a while, because the rest of the world kind of thought, well, that's a problem that's far away. That's something that the Chinese have to deal with. But I think we can't think like that anymore. The truth is, we're all part of a human race, and we're all part of a globe where people travel. And so we should be thinking about everyone as our friends, and we should see any problem anywhere in the world as our problem as well. And I think if we thought that way, and if you can all grow up to think that way, where it's easier than ever to travel, and it's easier than ever to share information across the internet and make friends in any nation, then I think we'll be better prepared in the future when something like this happens, to have that empathy to think about, oh, the problem there could affect me too, and I should care about those people. So that's why we were caught a little off foot, because it seemed far away, and there's many other things in our lives that could distract us. And I think nobody expected how bad this would break out. And as we go forward, we should just keep that in mind and try to always think in our lives, like, what's happening far away could reach me too. And people did start planning for it when they realized it was starting to break out. And the scientists and the doctors and nurses and the people of China did a really good job to try to protect all of us. They worked really hard, and they were heroic to try to contain it, to give the rest of the world time to be able to be prepared. And even though they did all that work, it still took a little time for politicians and everyday citizens to realize that this is a problem. Because if you look around and your life looks normal, then why are you going to pick up a boomerang, right? You're going to like, no, I don't need this today. And then suddenly, you start being like, oh no, it's the zombie land. You're going to grab your boomerang and freak out. So I think it's a little bit of just feeling like, oh, it's their problem, and then it reached us. But I say the good news is that now the whole world is organized around this. You have the World Health Organization that gave an announcement about a pandemic, and all the major countries of the world are making the really good steps to prepare us. And all the good scientists around the world are working to try to help us create an answer here. So we are prepared now. It might seem a little boring that you're at home, but these are the right kind of solutions to help us fix this problem. And humanity always wins, because this virus is dumb and we are smart. So we're going to beat this, and we're going to go forward.
I like it. Natalie, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the BioBuilder program that you run. And particularly, I think there's an online course that's starting next week that people could sign up for.
Yeah.
And maybe you could talk also a little bit about, in general, the relationship that society has with biology or biological engineering, and how you think that this new pandemic is going to change that interaction that we have with biology.
Yeah, it's really important. I am struck by the questions, the really smart questions, the great curiosity that I've seen in this Q&A session, this town hall today, and I am really encouraged that this next generation of young people, of our future, who will be our future scientists and our future engineers, really can take this and make really good change in the world. So BioBuilder just assumes that all the students and all the teachers have tremendous curiosity and potential, and that we can teach people who are curious about this how to use biology to make positive change in the world. If you can think about a challenge and think about a way that biology could solve it, we have the tools, the techniques, and now the teaching content that will help you do that and help you learn that. So I hope people come away from this with a couple of lessons. One, that there are things we can control and there are things that we can do together to make things improve. And then also that if you have a good idea, you have agency, you have a way to start to make things happen, and that there are organizations like BioBuilder, among others, to help teach you what you need to know and help move you down that path to help solve real world problems.
Excellent. Thank you, Natalie. And if can people still sign up for this course next week, and how should they go about that if they want to do that?
Absolutely. So BioBuilder has a social media presence, and there are links to sign up. And then we can also maybe put something in the notes for this town hall about signing up for this class. And it will be one of many that we offer, because I know that people are just getting their home set up ready for learning, and there'll be more and more questions and more things that we can do together online, so that more people can think about biology as a way to solve challenges that we're facing, and that more people can get involved with doing that. That's what BioBuilder tries to do.
Great. And I'm actually interested for my kids, Natalie. So can you tell us when it is and how frequently it is? And then also, could you say, is it live, or is it of course it's online, but is it live, or is it pre-recorded? Can you help understand?
Yes, thank you. So next week's workshops, we have 8 hours of synthetic biology and bioengineering teaching that we're planning. It's 2 hours a day, Monday through Thursday. And it will be live, which will allow people to ask questions and we'll respond to them. It is MIT graduate students as well as me. We will be teaching this material about synthetic biology, DNA engineering, protein engineering. How do you build a living sensor? And then how do you look at data and analyze data and communicate data? So it's really going to be appropriate for a lot of people. Next week is live. It will be recorded, and we can share those recordings afterwards if people want to dip their toe in at a different time.
Oh, great. And how much does it cost to sign up?
I think the link, it's a couple $100 for the whole workshop, but then again, the recordings, if you don't need it live or don't want it live, will be less.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Natalie. That's very exciting to see you doing that. And Sarah, I'd like to get your take on this in terms of if there are young people who are dialing in today and they want to prevent the next pandemic, and they want to follow in your footsteps and be in charge of a vaccine program at a biotech company, or go to university to study biotechnology, or take the BioBuilder program, what career advice would you give young people who are thinking about careers in biotechnology? What impact can they have on preventing a future pandemic like this?
Yeah, so my advice would be follow what you're interested in. If you feel like there's a certain cutout path for you that you need to follow and that you will somehow fail if you don't follow that, that's kind of setting you up for disappointment. But if you just kind of follow where your interests are, even if you don't know what exactly they are, especially if you're like a young student, you just know that you're interested in science or interested in biology, just see where that takes you. Like, explore what you're interested in, find out what you're good at, And then once you're a little older, maybe once you're in high school, you can start taking more specialized courses in chemistry and biochemistry, medical technologies, biotechnologies. And then once you're in college, if you really do want to study infectious diseases or vaccines, there are courses that you can take to get some training early on. But again, don't limit yourself to like what somebody else tells you that you need to do or what you should do. There's no one perfect route for everybody. The way I got into this field of research is just following what I liked. When I was in college, I felt a lot of pressure to go to medical school, but I didn't really want to be a doctor because I don't like looking at other people's blood. It kind of grosses me out. But I really like science, and I really like bodies, and I like figuring out how they work and how people get sick and how people can get better. And I happened to just follow what I was interested in, and I stuck to it, even when it's hard. I never gave up, even when I felt like, you know, I'll never be as good as these people who already have all this experience. I just stuck at it, and the perseverance helped me get to where I am now, and also just having a clear understanding of what I'm interested in and what I'm not interested in. And that helped me carve out a path in finding my way in biology and getting connected with people like Jake, who shared a similar vision and wanting to develop something in a small biotechnology company where we could make a medicine to help a lot of different people.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for that, and Jake as well. And if you want to know more about what it's like to work at their company, Distributed Bio, go to Netflix and you can see a show called Pandemic, and a real deep look into the lives of Sarah and Jake and the colleagues at Distributed Bio and what they're working on. Now, I want to be very respectful to our panelists. It's 2 minutes to 1. You all have very important things that you could be doing. We have 4 more live questions. Do you have, if we maybe go through and ask all the questions live and then we can get responses, do you have time to stay on for a couple of extra minutes, or do you have to go?
You can do a couple extra.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so we're going to go with Sharif first, then Sarah Evanega, then Anne Murako, and then Rohan Butel. So I'm just going to unmute Sharif if you want to go first, please.
Okay.
Yeah,
Hi, I'm Ethan. My question is it is it okay if you have something like delivered to your door from like a restaurant?
Excellent question, Ethan. So we'll come back. We'll come back to that in a second. Sarah Evanega.
My name is Enzo, and is it safe to eat raw sushi during the coronavirus period?
It might
Great.
be, but I don't think that I would like do that.
Okay, we'll come back to that. And Anne Murako.
Who did the first person in America get coronavirus?
Who was the first person? Good question. And then the last live question we're going to take is from Rohan Butel.
So, how? 1 minute. Let me check. I forget what was, but it's in the chat box. Okay. How does it spread? Like, first it came. We know that it was on Wuhan province, right? So in China, on Wuhan province in Asia, and then it came. It was in this fish market, and where they were selling pangolins, and those pangolins had eaten bats, and then they got like people who ate those pangolins got infected and spreaded it to everyone else.
And do you have a question about that, Rohan?
Yes. So how did spread?
I apologize, Rohan. I muted you by mistake. Could you just repeat the question?
Ongoing basis, how can it spread so quickly, like in Italy and stuff? Like how is it spreading so quickly?
Great question. How can it spread so quickly? Okay, so panelists, we have, can you get it from ordering something from a restaurant? Can you eat raw sushi? Who was the first person to get it? And how does it spread? Natalie, take your pick.
Well, I mean, I think all of these questions are really asking about the spread of the virus. And I think that the data so far says that it is on hard surfaces that we touch and then put into, the virus can last on hard surfaces, and then we put that virus into our mouths or into our nose. So the best thing we can do is wash our hands and not touch our face and disinfect the surfaces. And then we will learn more about this virus and its spread over time.
Great, excellent. Any additional comments from Sarah or Jake? Jake, I see you've brought somebody new to the town hall. Do you want to introduce her?
So this is Seraphine. She's the one who whispers ideas in my ear on a regular basis. She's 6 months old. Hi, Seraphine. Say hello to everyone. And she's basically immune to coronavirus, so she's a lucky little critter. So I will address the question of when do we think the first person in America got coronavirus. So there are kind of scientific sleuths that hunt down these sorts of questions, and they have some cool tools to try to find the answer. We think it happened back in January, and it happened in Seattle. And we're not sure. This is a guess. But
yeah, like in late January.
Yeah, like late January. That's right. Yeah, you're good. Yeah. So we may have one of the scientists who cracked the case on the call right now. And so the way we figure that out, there's two different ways. One is we go and we sequence the DNA, so the genetic information of the virus from lots of different people, and we check and we can kind of see how the virus slowly mutated and spread, and we can trace it back to the original version of the virus that got in. And then by seeing how much spread has happened and kind of trying to figure out what the parental looked like, the original virus, and comparing it to the versions of the virus in China, we can estimate how long we think it's been in circulation. The other thing you can do is you can start making guesses about how many people are sick, and you can calculate backwards. Like, well, if we have 2,000 people sick now, and every 6 days this doubles, then you can count backwards and sort of estimate when you think the outbreak first started. And the last thing you can do, which is pretty complicated but super cool, is it's like a video game. It's this thing called modeling, where you have this video game that estimates, given all the places in the country that have examples of illness, you can estimate sort of given how people tend to move, you can kind of make a reverse time machine that works backwards and predicts when that would have had to have started. And all of those numbers end up telling us that it happened in mid to late January. We didn't know for a while because we weren't testing. So it was going around silently, and some people had coronavirus and they thought they had the cold or the flu. And eventually we found out.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Jake at Distributed Bio, Sarah Ives, that's Jake Glanville at Distributed Bio, Sarah Ives at Distributed Bio, and Natalie Kuldell at BioBuilder, BioBuilder and MIT. Thank you all for joining us today. Let's give a collective round of applause to our expert panelists. And I'm sorry to the 100 questions that we did not get to today. We'll see what we can do about that, and we hope that we'll host another one of these in the not so distant future. So thank you all for joining us today. Remember to wash your hands and to stay home and flatten the curve, and we'll all get through this together. And if you're thinking about careers in biotechnology to stop the next pandemic, go to the BioBuilder course next week. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one of these. So thank you all very much, and thanks again to all of our panelists.